Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom, brothers and sisters. Giving honor and praise to the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth, the Most High, the one who sees all and is not seen, the one who judges all and is not judged. That is who we're speaking of, the Most High, Yah Elohim, Baruch Shemo, blessed be his name. Brothers and sisters, this particular teaching, this particular lesson, this particular presentation is actually a do-over of one that was done in the past, with more information added to such for edification purposes. Brothers and sisters, in this day in which they refer to as President's Day, I thought it would be a befitting topic to sit there and get into, brothers and sisters, concerning this kind of subject matter at hand. All right? Blacks from Africa to America and the presence of the presidents in slavery. All right? Brothers and sisters, what you're looking at here is essentially different nations that happen to be what you call black. On the top that you see there, brothers and sisters, all right, is a person from East India that happens to be what you call black. So you had the East Indians that were black, that are black. You understand? That's one thing we wanted to point out. Now, on the bottom part there is a black Arab, brothers and sisters, from way back in the day. All right? So when we get into this particular subject matter, you will find out that the Roman philosopher, the Roman doctor, by the name of Galen, Galen, was the person, brothers and sisters, that sat there and spoke about the Arabs of old being black or swarthy. All right, so this is what we want to talk about for edification purposes. Next slide. Thank you. Black Egyptian and Black Hebrew. What you're looking at, brothers and sisters, on the upper part is the image of an ancient Egyptian woman that dates from the era of Dynasty 18 of Egypt. That was Queen Nefertari of ancient Egypt, brothers and sisters. She actually being, in the biblical terminologies, called a Hamitic woman. All right, but we just want to show from the book Before the Mayflower by Laurent Benedjuda what we're talking about for edification purposes. What we're looking at, brothers and sisters, with the image of the men on the left-hand side, brothers and sisters, come from what they call the Dura Europas. That right there is an image of ancient Israelites painted by Israelites that lived in Syria, brothers and sisters, about the Exodus. So when you go into a book called History of Israel by Michael Grant, that's actually the cover of that book. All right, so that's something we want to talk about for edification purposes. Next slide. Black Asiatics in Egypt. What you're looking at, brothers and sisters, is two pictures of different Asiatics that was living in the land of Egypt. Now, one way you know good and well, brothers and sisters, about the person there being Asiatic on the bottom is because the ancient Egyptians were not known for wanting to keep their beard like that. That's why when you go into different references and sources, it talks about the Asiatic man of the first millennium BCE in ancient Egypt being pictured with a beard. All right, so that's something we want to get into for edification purposes. Now, when you're looking at what is pictured there on the top, brothers and sisters, is a person inside of an Asiatic or Western Asiatic garment. Brothers and sisters, when you go and you read about Joseph's coat of many colors, you will find out that the ancient Egyptians were not known for having those kind of different aspects in their own clothing. It was the Asiatics that we're going to show later on that actually went into Egypt that brought that kind of style of clothing to the people. So one thing we want to point out, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes, is that when you find people talking about nudity was part of our people's culture, that's just a freak on the low. I remember I had a discussion with a person online about that, and the person was married. So, of course, if somebody were to ask this man to see a nude picture of his wife, he would be offended. This is what happens when consciousness and morality don't meet up within a particular person, all right? So let's go into the next part, brothers and sisters. Black Ethiopians and Black Babylonians. What we're looking at, brothers and sisters, on the left-hand side of the picture, all right, is an actual Ethiopian man that's actually in the land of Ethiopia to this day. What you're looking at, brothers and sisters, on the right-hand side is a picture coming from the book called The Babylonians by Gwendolyn Leake. All right. And in that particular book, as you can see there, the Babylonians themselves were shown to be a people of color. So this is what we're talking about, blacks from Africa to America. We're going to show the transition of such, brothers and sisters, and how that came about in this particular presentation. Next slide. What you're looking at, brothers and sisters, is the Hyksos aspect in the image of an ancient Canaanite. Now, brothers and sisters, on the left-hand side picture is what we're talking about from the tomb of Kemud-Hotep and how the Asiatics looked when they were going into the land of Egypt itself. All right? So the animals, for instance, that they were bringing with them were not native to the ancient Egyptians. So this is something we want to point out, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes in that particular regard. What you're looking at, brothers and sisters, on the right-hand side of this PowerPoint is an image of how the ancient Canaanites looked. All right. So as we can see, that person there is shown with what you will call, in today's terminology, Negroid or black features. Next slide. The Hyksos aspect, part 2. What we were talking about before, brothers and sisters. If you remember, let's go back. 1, 2, 3. Remember we went to this picture and it says black Asiatics in Egypt, and notice the distinguished colors within the person's garment. Now let's go back and show what we were talking about for edification purposes. All right. Now this is a picture of the Hyksos that was going into Egypt. Now look at the lower picture. You got more so the original one and then the bleached version of such. You understand? But when you look at this particular aspect right here, you can still see how the garments looked and everything of that sort. We want to point out, brothers and sisters, that what you refer to as a dashiki, quote unquote, brothers and sisters, is not native, brothers and sisters, to the ancient Egyptians. That is the style of clothing, brothers and sisters, that the people called the Asiatics or the Amu or the Retenu or the Setu, they were the ones who brought that to the ancient Egyptian society. So this is something we want to talk about and get into for edification purposes. All right, next slide. From Persia or Iran, from Europe, black Persians, black Minoans. Now, the original Europeans, we want to point out in this particular regard, were people of color, as you see there on the right-hand side. And the ancient Persians from the temple and palace of Susa, which goes back to Darius I, they themselves of ancient Persia were shown as people of color, or what you will call black of today. One of the things we want to point out is that, no offense or knock on quote the Kemetic community, is they seem to try to make everything of Kemet black, and everywhere else must have been the opposite of such. So therefore, they would say that the ancient Minoans, the ancient Asiatics, the ancient Sea peoples as well must have all been Caucasoid. Brothers and sisters, that is emphatically incorrect. Ancient Egypt does not claim, nor did it ever claim, all black people. All right? So that's something we want to talk about for edification purposes. Next slide. The Etruscans. The Etruscans, brothers and sisters, were the people that were originally in a place that we call Italy of today. And as you can see, this is how they looked and this is how they are portrayed. Now, when you go into books such as by Ivan Sertima, you will begin to see more and more references and more sources of this kind of subject matter. Now, Sumer, which was in the land of Iraq of today, this is how the ancient people of Iraq actually looked. Why is it, brothers and sisters, that people want to sit there and try to make only, quote, Egypt black, and some people don't even want to make Egypt black, quote unquote, and they're trying to make everything else outside of that white? Because they have done the same thing that the European has done in reverse, where they try to sit there and make everything divided upon a color line. That's why I like citing the book by J.A. Rogers talking about nature knows no color line, because in that particular regard, you got black people all over the face of the earth. When you go into the book, What They Did Not Tell You in History Class, by Indus Kamed Cush, that author right there, brothers and sisters, explains emphatically, when you get right down into it, that you have black people in Malaysia. with afros. So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to talk about for edification purposes. Next slide. Thank you. Egypt, Cush, and Nubia. The kingdom of Cush, 700 BCE. Now, the kingdom of Cush, all right, as we see right here in Eastern Africa, went all the way up. Now, if it's 700 BCE, we're speaking now in regards to the house of Israel. That's during the era, brothers and sisters, around King Hezekiah of the tribe of Judah. Now, how does that tie into the Israelites, brothers and sisters? Is because King Hezekiah of Judah was in association with King Tahaka that you read of in the Bible in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 19, verse 9. So we want this to be noted for edification purposes. If you had kings and kingdoms that were in one way or the other in cahoot one with another, why would one try to sit there and go on my channel and then try to sit there and say that the ancient Egyptians did go to West Africa, the ancient Egyptians did go into where Israel was, and the Israelites did go into Egypt, but Israelites did not go to Western Africa? That right there doesn't make any sense when you get right down into it for edification purposes. All right. So once again, this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Let us continue on with the next slide. Thank you. Upper and Lower Egypt. Now, what are we looking at right here, brothers and sisters? Upper Egypt, brothers and sisters, is Lower Egypt. Pardon me. Upper Egypt is Southern Egypt. Lower Egypt, brothers and sisters, is Northern Egypt. Because the way they saw it with the Nile's flow from going from the south to the north, they sat there and said that the part where it starts from in the land of Egypt must have been the upper part, and then the lower part must have been where it actually led off into the Mediterranean. So that's just something we want to go over and show for edification purposes. The lands that they refer to as Tashmehu and Tamehu and so forth and so on, meaning Lower and Upper Egypt respectfully, they did not claim all black people, even though they themselves were of color. So, brothers and sisters, we want this to be known and shown how the maps look, how the people of the area looked, and so forth and so on. And we're going to try to sit there and show, for edification purposes, how it leads into what we're talking about to where we are now. Next slide. The Jahi, Set-U, and Sea peoples. Now, as you can see here, the Jahi is an ancient Egyptian term in regards to the people that lived in Canaan. But they didn't distinguish between the actual Canaanites and any other, quote, Asiatic that would have been inside of that land. Just as much as when you deal with the aspect of the Phoenician, it's a generic term. The Jahi is a generic term. Set-U is a generic term. So the terminology such as Sea peoples is a generic term. So these are things we want to talk about and show for edification purposes. There will be, most High bless, a book coming forth that is called, all right, Israelites Respond to Kemetic Claims, Evidence of the Exodus. And that right there, brothers and sisters, is an updated version of the book that's now defunct called Egypt Talking Writing. I took that book out of print for one reason or the other in regards if we can go there with the publishers. But I'm updating it again, most High willing, very soon, and have the information out there, and we'll put on this channel how to acquire such a book. Next slide. Benepta Steel. The princes are prostrate, saying mercy. Desolation is Tehenu. Hati is at pacified. Plundered is the Canaan. Carried off is Ashkelon. Israel is laid waste. His seed is not. Brothers and sisters, when you look at this right here, pardon my misspelling of the word waste in that particular regard. All right, it said the princes are prostrated, saying mercy. Not one raises his hand among the 9 bows. That means that they were ancient nations that the ancient Egyptians required or signed as enemies. Desolation is the Chehenu. Hati is pacified. Hati in the ancient Bible will be known as the Hittites. Plundered is the Canaan, meaning the Canaanites, with every evil. Carried off is Ashkelon. Ashkelon is where the people of the Peleset also known as the Palestine, also known as the Caphtorim, also known as the Philistine, also known as the Philistines lived. Seized upon is Gezer. Gezer, brothers and sisters, you read about in the Bible because that became a very important city that the king of Egypt at a particular time gave to Solomon. All right, we're getting that into another PowerPoint. Israel is, Yanoam is made as that which did not exist. Israel is laid waste, his seed is not. So one of the things we want to point out is that they refer to this as the Mendeptah still or the Israel still. Now, for whatever reason, everybody likes to sit there and try to say, oh, Israel's not even mentioned in there. This is how you know, brothers and sisters, that the so-called conscious community is controlled by, quote, the powers that be. When you find videos that sit up there talk about the Illuminati has infiltrated the conscious community, and we already know by going into the book, Behold the Pale Horse, by William Cooper, you know good and well, every place where Protocols of Zion spoke about Illuminati, you should replace that with Jew, talking about the European Jew. That is why when a black man talks about he is the true house of Israel, we find some guys coming along later that obviously are controlled, paid by, endorsed by the quote powers that be, brothers and sisters that want to sit there and deny Israel's existence. The ancient Egyptians did not deny Israel's existence. So on Facebook, when they have this thing called the Final Resolution Battle, ancient Kemet versus the Hebrew Israelites, somebody sent me a link and asked me if I want to join the debate room between Hebrew Israelites versus Kemetic. My response, I cannot say on here because of edification purposes, and there may be children, but we know what it is. Get that foolishness away from me. You're going to come and ask me in my inbox on Facebook, do you like to debate? No, I don't do debates. I do presentations. All of that debate stuff, you will find yourself year in and year out still at the debate table, just like Congress of the United States. Because when you don't have a resolution and a solution in mind, you're going to do nothing but just go like the Willie Lynch letter talks about the spinning vortex again and again and again and again. You got to be kidding me. I'm not going year in and year out with a debate. You understand? So this is something, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes. Next slide. The general or the Libyan. This is how they looked, brothers and sisters, the ancient people of Libya. Meshwesh was part of the sea peoples and later as Moors. Moors is another, brothers and sisters, generic term. The Moors that we hear about in common history that went into Spain, that Stanley Lane Poole talks about in his book, that the other person by the name of Ivan Sertima talks about in his book, those Moors, brothers and sisters, that went with General Tariq in the 8th century AD were not calling themselves Moors. They were called that. This is why when you go to a beautiful channel that one of the Moorish science brothers does point out, everywhere he talks about where Moors was in Germany, France, and Spain, and Portugal is all European places. The people that came out of Africa that were later on called Moors did not call themselves Moors. Just as much as when you go, brothers and sisters, into the book by Ivan Sertima about the story of the Moors in Spain, you will sit there and find out, which I found out, there is no sea creature originally called a sardine. Sardines get that name when it's canned. Just the same, there were no people calling themselves Negroes. That is a name once the people were put in chains and sent over to the Western Hemisphere. So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to sit there and talk about for edification purposes. And what they call Black History Month and what they refer to as President's Day, this is what we're going to get up into, brothers and sisters. All right? So we can sit there and get some understanding of what we're talking about. Next slide, please. Israelites. Now, let's go in so that way this channel can be understood. The people that you see there pictured on the lower right-hand side is images of people of the tribe of Judah that was taken by the king of Assyria from the Judite city of Lachish. When you go into a book called Ancient Hebrews by Gert Muller. The archaeological evidence. They found, brothers and sisters, in the 1930s, skulls that were dug into the earth in the land of Lachish that had what you called Negroid featured kind of skulls. And whence they sat there and did the test upon the bones that they found in the land of Lachish. Lachish, brothers and sisters, in the book of Joshua, chapter 15, is noted as a place in the land of Judah. Lachish, brothers and sisters, in the land of the Bible, Jeremiah 34, is what it talks about as one of the remaining cities that was not plundered by the Babylonians. But we already know from the book of Kings, 2 Kings 18, that Lachish was one of the cities that the ancient Assyrians took over. So when they found skulls, as pointed out by Gert Muller in his book as cited a couple of minutes ago, Archaeological Evidence of the Ancient Hebrews, which you can get online, brothers and sisters, you will begin to see that they found the Negroid skull features. This is not something we making up off the top of our head. We want to, at the same time, break down and decimate the Willie Lynch concept. I remember having to explain to a light-skinned brother that not everybody in the ancient world was ebony hue or midnight. Well, brother, do you think the Hicks were white? And I looked at this brother's image on Facebook, and he looks more like the complexion of my biological mommy than I do, because I took after the complexion of my father. This particular brother has the same complexion of the same woman, may she rest in peace, whose stomach was cut open so my big self could be pulled out during a cesarean. You understand? So the point I'm pointing out is this. My mother, may she rest in peace, was not that far of a different complexion than the person you see there riding upon a horse. That comes from out of the murals and out of the paintings of ancient Israelites according to the Cushites. This is what we're talking about for edification purposes. All right? Let's go on to the next slide. Egypt and Byblos. Under the kings of the 12th dynasty, Egypt once more became a highly organized, well-administered country with prosecuted policies. In respect to Nubia, Libya, and Western Asia, there were co-regencies. What are we looking at, brothers and sisters, about Egypt and Byblos? All right, so we can gain something for edification purposes, all right? We're going to have to put the charger in. Can't let it go out like that. All right? So let's go on. Egypt, as you see there on the map, brothers and sisters, is connected there to where it says Lebanon, brothers and sisters. Lebanon of today was where ancient Syria was. Syria and Assyria, as pointed out on this channel, is two different things. All right, so now looking at this for edification purposes. When you go into the 12th and 13th dynasty writings of ancient Egypt, one being the Emperor Papyrus, it speaks about the trade between Egypt and Byblos has ceased. Byblos, brothers and sisters, is very, very important when we get into history, because Byblos will lead you to the people of Tyre, Tyre, which in the Bible, in the book of Ezekiel, the 28th chapter, 27th chapter as well, it speaks about the people of Tyre and about them dealing in purple. Purple in Hebrew is said as Aramean. Purple in Greek is said as Purine, where you get the word Phoenician, because Phoenician, like Setu and Amu, as well as the term Hebrew, believe it or not, are all generic terms. So this is why we want to sit there and get into this for edification purposes. Now, ancient Egypt, brothers and sisters, had policies in Western Asia. So why is it we sit there and see, quote, the current conscious community trying to only sit there and have current Egypt as the focus of Black people, Black history, and Black culture? I'll tell you why. As a person who has taught in a college, when they go into Africana studies about Africa, certainly about Egypt, all they talk about is one king named Akhenaten. Akhenaten was to the ancient Egyptians a coon. He was to the ancient Egyptians a sellout. This is why his successor, such as Horemheb, try to erase all the memory that he could of Akhenaten. So why is it that the European in their college institutions seem to only want to talk about Egypt when they talk about Africa, and then of only thing about Egypt, they seem to only want to talk about Akhenaten? I remember being a student in a college at one time, and I remember explaining about the aspect of Mentuhotep, about the aspect of Esarhaddon of Assyria, about the aspect of the Amarna records. The teacher just was like, okay, that's enough. Because even though colleges, I want to say this not as a college rep or anything like that, the books they got there are good. But I'll tell you what the college I taught and told me while I was the one to teach Greco-Roman history. Don't get sidetracked from the syllabus. Bye-bye. When you go against the college curriculum, bye-bye. It's been real, dude. So my point, brothers and sisters, and all of that is this. It is important to study, but make sure, just like they tell you in the first and second grade, study beyond and do other things beyond. Just don't stay stuck in one thing. And in light of not staying stuck in one thing, brothers and sisters, that's what we as men have to sit there and do. We cannot sit there and get stuck in one particular thing. If we know ourselves as the house of Israel, it says, when the Most High will enlarge in your border. Why are we stuck? Year in and year out with a debate? You can't be serious. I'm not debating the same people again and again, because that's nothing but a smoke screen. They're there presented to sit there and be a nuisance and a thorn in the side of the house of Israel. So don't entertain that foolishness. You understand? Next slide. Hyksos matter. The term Hyksos is a Greek term meaning, quote, shepherd kings. But in Egyptian, it is Haku Shoswet, said by some as Hekakathu, meaning rulers of foreign lands. The Egyptians did not distinguish which particular nation these Asiatics belonged to. They simply called them a generic term. The other used terms are Amu, Setu, as well as Retenu. You can look them up and you will find out that these were ancient Egyptian terminologies for the people that you called that lived in this area here that I'm going to show with the map. All around here, where you see Jordan, northern Sinai, Lebanon, all the places over here, the ancient Egyptians referred to those people as Amu, Setu, and Retenu. Now, I want to point something out, brothers and sisters, because in history, you will find out about a people called the Kassites, Kassites. The Kassite people were associated, brothers and sisters, with the Babylonians. The Babylonians were associated with the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans, as well as the Babylonians, were associated in part with the Assyrians. The Assyrians and the Babylonians were the people that ruled where the ancient Sumerians were after a people called the Guti chased the Sumerian people out. These are things that I point out in the book called Deuteronomy 28, verses 15 to 68, History Untold to the Masses. Brothers and sisters, these are things we want to talk about. Now, for those who are listening, those who might be concerned, while we talk about the Israelites in the house of Israel, right? There's a difference. When you see black people saying that they're Israelites, and when you see black people who consistently say Jew and Jewish, Jew and Jewish. I want that to be noted for edification purposes. Israelites, those who have understanding, know good and well that Deuteronomy 28, verse 37, speaks about people being called a byword. Well, Jew is short for Judah. Yisrael means let the Most High contend. Some people say Yisrael or Israel means Prince of God. Whatever understanding one may have of it, why would you want to accept a byword as opposed to something that has the word of, or the name, or the title, El of the creator of heaven and earth? Why would Jew doesn't have anything godly in it? Yisrael, the L in Yisrael signifies the Most High. Why would you sit there and settle for a byword such as Jew? That's why I wanted to emphasize and point out there's a difference between people, black people today saying that they are Israelites and black people who say they are Jews. And there is a difference. And all you got to do is ask those guys, do you say you're an Israelite? I don't deal with those black niggers. And they don't wear no blue in their fringes. And they do not sit there and think that we are correct because we don't dabble in and so forth and so on. So those brothers and sisters, I want to emphasize for edification purposes. There are those brothers and sisters who are what you call Israelites, who are deemed black Israelites, and then there are those who deem themselves black Jews. You understand? That's something I want to point out again. There are those black people who call themselves Israelites and who are unfortunately called black Israelites. And then there are people, black people, who willingly call themselves black Jews. So know and understand that there is a difference. They say that when we say Kwadosh, that we are incorrect in saying so. They say that when we play the drums on Shabbat, that we are incorrect in doing so. They say that when we don't light a candle, a Sabbath candle, Friday evening, that we are wrong for doing so. They say that we are wrong because we eat meat and cheese together. Because we don't do what they call kashrut. Because we say we are the people that was given the laws that Moses got. And we don't follow the 7 no-hide laws. So, brothers and sisters, we want to emphasize there is a difference between they who are lowering themselves as Israelites, who happen to be black people, and people who happen to be black that call themselves black Jews. So please understand the difference. Let's go on to the next slide. All right, so now let's go in now. Asiatic man in Egypt. So what we're looking at right here, brothers, sisters, as you can see with the full beard, which was not an Egyptian custom, the Egyptians had their thing with the prince's lock and part of the beard, not fully on the face, but just braided part of the chin. All right? This is an Asiatic man inside of the land of Egypt, dated to the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. All right? Next slide. Somebody typed in, Jew is absolutely a byword. We never called ourselves that. Understood. Then somebody wrote, I hear some blacks, in parentheses, blacks, can't call themselves Jew. I want to emphasize something concerning that kind of subject. No matter how updated a Bible can be, you will notice you will never see the word Jew from Genesis 1:1 to the end of Deuteronomy 34. The Torah, no, regardless of whether it's the King James Version, regardless if the Gideon Version, regardless if it's the New Translation Version, from Genesis 1:1 to the end of Deuteronomy 34, never do you even see in the newest updated versions of the Bible, do you see the word Jew in the Torah. So we find some who might want to despise the word Israel and label themselves as Jewish or Jew. But Israel is all throughout that. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. So I don't know why these people do what they do, but on here, we're going to sit there and show what we're talking about. Leviticus chapter 13, verse 29 to verse 30. And when a man or woman hath a plague upon the head or upon the beard, then the priest shall look upon the plague, and behold, if the appearance thereof be deeper than the skin, and there be in it yellow thin hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a scald. It is leprosy of the head or of the beard. Now, what does it say in the Hebrew? We'ish o isha ki yihye bo naga ba rosh o bazakwan wara'a hahohen et hanega wehine mar ehu amok min haor ubo se'ar zahob dak watime oto. Hakohen detek hu. Za ra'at harosh. O hazakwan hu. The key word we want to point out is this word right here. Zahob. Zahob, brothers and sisters, means yellow. It's also translated as the word blonde. So when somebody has a thin blonde slash yellow hair coming up out of their flesh, and you can look and see that it's coming from deeper within the skin of it, what the European calls the beautiful blonde, that in the Hebraic understanding is part of the plague of leprosy. That is one of the determined factors of the plague of leprosy. The ancient Hebrews were not blonde-haired unless they had what you called the plague of leprosy. This is what we want to point out for edification purposes. Next slide. Daniel chapter 10, verse 5 through verse 6. I lifted up my eyes and behold. I lifted up my eyes and looked and behold the man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with the fine gird of Uphaz. His body also was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as torches of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to burn as brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. We're only going to deal with the lower paragraph on the left, right-hand side in Hebrew. Uguiato, Kartarshish, Upanao, Kamar E, Barak, We'enao, Kala Pede Esh, Uz, Ro Taiwa, Omar Galop Taiwa, Ka'in the Koshet, Kwalal, Wakol the Baral, Kakol Hamon. The Koshet is the word we want to emphasize on. The Koshet, brothers and sisters, means brown or bronze. When you read right here the word Kwalal, burnt, brothers and sisters, burnished brass. The Koshet means brown or brass, brothers and sisters. So this vision that Daniel had, when he said he looked up and he saw a man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with the fine gold of Uphaz. His body also like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning. His arms and his feet like in color to burn as brass. How does a pale-faced, speckled, freckled, so-called ruddy person fit in the description of this here? It doesn't fit, brothers and sisters. The one's arms and feet was like to the color of brass that is burnt. You understand? The Bible is not the white man's book. Next slide. The Lachish matter. This right here, as we went over, confirmed when the Assyrians, as you see here, were taking the people of Judah from the land of Lachish in captivity. This right here is another image of such, of people of Judah being taken into captivity to the land of the Assyrian provinces. Next slide. Assyria and the Israelites. The Lachish matter. The city in Judah in the time of the 8th century BCE, pictured in Assyria on the walls of Sennacherib of Assyria. Sennacherib, brothers and sisters, is actually mentioned in the Bible. You see the style of the hair that we even seeing of the captives of Judah and the full beard? Now, where did we see this full beard before, brothers and sisters? Because we want to point out that the cutting of the beard was done in slavery to the black man. The cutting of the beard, brothers and sisters, was done to Joseph when he was in Egypt. Because the ancient Egyptians, like the ancient Europeans, and like the European man, aka the American of today, they despise having a beard, certainly a well-kept beard, if you will. You understand? Because they say it doesn't look regular. It doesn't look natural. It doesn't look okay. Just like they tell black women, you should get a relaxer. So do they tell black men with beards, you should clean it up. They view having a beard, brothers, sisters, as being dirty. The ancient Egyptians viewed having a beard as being dirty. So this is how you can tell that the images of ancient people inside of the walls of Egypt with a beard, that's not Egyptian customs. That's another people inside of the Egyptian walls painted. So now we're going to go back to this part right here where we can see people of Judah shown with the aspect of having a beard. Now, the Hebrew word for elder is the word zakwain. The Hebrew word for beard is the word zakwan. The Hebrew word for elder is the word zakwan. Zakwain is elder, sorry. And zakwan is beard. Zakwan, beard. Zakwain, elder. You know, in Hebrew, it has the exact same spelling. They don't want you, brothers and sisters, to look like an elder. That's why they okay as the white man calling the black man boy, because boys don't have beards. They say it looks cute when you cut your beard off. But the Hebrew word for cute is the same word, nechmad, in Hebrew that the Nakash described to Eve about the fruit that she was not supposed to have. It said it was pleasant to the eyes. That pleasant to the eyes in Hebrew is the word nechmad, which they translate also as the word cute. So when they tell us as brothers, well, when you sit there and cut your beard off, you know, it looks cute. The Spanish word for cute is mono. It's the same word for monkey in Spanish. So when we tell us as brothers, just like they tell sisters to get a relaxer, because the black woman's ma'ase mikshe, her hair being looking the way it does, as Isaiah chapter 3 describes, a well set hair, curly hair, ma'ase mikshe in Isaiah. They want to sit there and say, oh, you will sit there and you can cut that off and you'll look better and more presentable. They knew what they was doing. Just like the Egyptians cut off Joseph's beard, so do the Americans tell the descendants of the house of Israel, like Joseph, well, we're going to have to cut this off in order for you to get this kind of job. So when we read Israel, when we read about Egypt and ships, understand why we say such a thing. Just like Joseph went through stuff and he had to cut his hair in order to stand before the Pharaoh, so do black men today have to sit there and line up their beard and cut all their facial hair off before they go before dignitaries of this society. So please don't ask again, black Jew and others, why do y'all black Israelites, quote unquote black Israelites, say Deuteronomy 28, it says Egypt? Why do y'all say you're talking about hair? Because the same thing Joseph went through is the same thing we going through. Joseph was lied on by a woman and was put in jail over a lie. Black men have been put in jail over some cracker. Here was a nigga, he raped me. Just like that woman lied on Joseph, so do brothers get lied on today. Just like Joseph was turned in by his brothers, so do black men have an evil eye for his neighbor. So when we talk about Deuteronomy 28:68 being in Egypt again by ships, all you got to do is look at what the Israelites went through and then look what we go through here. But black Judaism, which is an undertone teaching in this presentation, we want to decimate the idea that Israelites are equivalent to black Judaism, because it's not. And Old Testament Israelites are not black Jews who just reject Jesus Christ. Old Testament Israelites are Israelites who are based upon the Old Testament. There's a difference between the two. So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to just go and show for edification purposes. Next slide, brothers and sisters. Aramean / Syrian. These are the people of Aram, aka Syria. The people of Aram were called Syrian, brothers and sisters, by the Greeks. You can go in the book of Josephus and it tells you that. All right? The same people that we see right here. You got a different kind of skin color here and a different color here. See, the Willie Lynch, you must put the black, dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves. That, brothers and sisters, shows you exactly what it was. Light-skinned people is not a new thing. But in order for the people to sit there and stay divided, they had to sit there and have that kind of thing to sit there and make us think different of our own selves. Now, the Aramean people is part of the family of the Israelites on the maternal side. Rebecca, Jacob's mother, was an Aramean woman. The tribes of Israel's mothers were Aramean women. Raquel, Zilpah, Bilhah, and Leah were Aramean women, people of the women of Aram. And this is how the Aramean people looked. So the mothers of the house of Israel looked like this. In skin tone, what are you talking about when you say the children of Israel is not black? The children of Israel descend from people who are what you will call black. So once again, that's what we want to talk about for edification purposes. Next slide. Rogers. I was talking with a beautiful friend of mine. This is the same sister who actually makes these PowerPoints and she does all of the artwork in it. May the Most High, the Creator, bless her for such acts. And I want to say something, sidebar. All right? Sidebar. I want to make this comment. When you have a brother or a sister, a person that is concerned about your well-being and who shows love, you don't burn that bridge. We are told not to burn the bridges of employment. We should not also burn the bridges of brothers and sisters and friends. That's important. See, love, brothers and sisters, is something that's shown. You can tell love. You ever notice a situation when somebody tries to act like they don't like or have love for someone else, like in elementary? Hey, do you like her? Hey, no, I don't like her. It's the brother, the young man got the biggest cheese grin. Or to the girl, to the guy, about the guy. Do you like him? No. But every time the girls snap on him, she's right there to defend him. And this is not to get sidetracked from the teaching, but I'm not going to name the names of two people in school. But I'm going to mention this. The girls were dissing a brother in the class. And when I say dissing him, bubble lip, his clothing, he stinks, which the brother did not stink. You understand? His sneakers is bummy. They just ragged this brother out. This sister sat there and she said words I cannot say in this presentation. But in a nutshell, due to her profanity, I will clean it up by saying, y'all females need to be quiet. So we as adults can understand what she literally said. And everybody knew from then she likes him. But she couldn't take the fact that those sisters were snapping on that brother because her inner liking and the love that she had for that particular brother didn't allow her to sit there and see him getting disrespected and insulted and her acting like ain't nothing happened. So my point in that is this. If you can stand there and see a brother or sister being insulted and snapped on and you say nothing, baby, that shows you where your heart and where your love is at. You understand? Because one thing you will know, brothers and sisters, like KRS once said, that word love is very serious. And it's not something that you can fake. You understand? That is not something that you can fake, brothers and sisters. If you want to find out who might quote like who, all you got to do is just talk about it in a positive way. You will sit there and see what it is. I'm telling you, I've experienced it from school. They called me and asked me, and they called me by my government name. You like Ebony, don't you? I was about maybe the 8th or so grade. And I was like, nah, I don't like her like that. The fact that I said I don't like her like that, it said everything. So they started making up songs like, my government name, which I'm not going to mention, such and such, like 70, and they sat there and made songs and wrote letters and made drawings about us on the board. Remember, we in 8th grade, so these kind of silly things happen. You understand? So the point I'm saying in all of that is this. You can't fake love. Man to brother, brother to man to woman, sister to sister. Camp to camp. If there's no reality of that ahaba, it can't be shown. The reason why we can understand the Most High did not take everything from Judah when he divided the kingdom, says because of the respect that the Most High had for David. So I'm going to leave you a little portion right here. You understand? The Queen of Sheba in the book of 2nd Chronicles 9 stated to Solomon, because of the love that the Lord thy God had for thee, therefore he established your kingdom. The love that comes from the Most High. It says, Jacob have I loved, and Esau have I hated. Israel, we have to know and understand, brothers and sisters. Jacob have I loved. So why are we focused more on the Most High hating Esau as opposed to focusing on the love that the Most High has for Israel? He said, Yaakov ahati, with Esau saneti. Jacob have I loved, and Esau have I hated. Is Esau the Arabs? Is Esau the Jewish man? Is Esau the white man? Whoever he is, the Most High hates him. We know who we are, and we know the Most High loves us. So what we have to do is return back to the Most High. And one foolproof way is by loving your neighbor as yourself. Brothers and sisters, J.A. Rogers died in 1966. His writings included Africa's Gift to America, Nature Knows No Color Line, 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro, From Superman to Man, Sex and Race, Volume 1, 2, and 3. Brothers and sisters, when he died, his daughter took over his business. That's a difference. We do presentations online, but we want to emphasize what we are citing is not other videos. We are in videos citing books, be it the Bible, be it external sources. We're not citing video after video after video. We're citing book after book after book after book. Put your face on a book. Stop giving Facebook all that energy, all that time, and all that attention, brothers and sisters. There are companies that are publishing companies. Lulu is one of them. Create Space is another one. Amazon has their own. Amazon takes most of the refunds and most of the revenue, but if you want to go that way, so be it. But there are ways you can sit there and get a book out in 2 months if you got the attention span for it. You can pass your book down to your children. You cannot pass down your YouTube channel, because if they shut down YouTube, your book is still in the Library of Congress. Do you see the difference? When J.A. Rogers passed away in 1966, brothers and sisters, his daughter took over the business. You passing something down for future generations. Willie Lynch spoke about, I focus on future generations. Rudolph Windsor, another person cited in this particular part right here. He wrote a book, Babylon and Timbuktu, Valley of the Dry Bones, Judea, Chimbu's Underworld, as well as the book, Deborah and Barak. He has a thing called Windsor's Golden Series. In the book that I wrote, Giving Thanks to the Most High, I cited Rudolph Windsor's book over 6 times. And each time I made sure he got his credit, because it ain't making me any less of a moray to cite my sources. You understand? And then we have Ezekiel. Ezekiel was a prophet. He didn't just go and speak and move the people. There's a book called Ezekiel. Wood of Windsor wrote a book. J.A. Rogers wrote a book. So let's see what can we glean from these people. May they all rest in peace, except for Wood of Windsor. May the Most High continue to bless his life. The Chaldeans were originally Negroes. That is what J.A. Rogers said in his book. Wood of Windsor stated the Babylonians were Negroes, the origin of the Negro race. He was citing a German historian by the name of Herbert Wendt. Last name of the guy is this, W-E-N-D-T. Herbert Wendt. He wrote a book that Wood of Windsor cited, in which he said Babylon is the origin of the Negro race, and that is where the Negro origin is from. Babylon, we already showed us in ancient Iraq. We already showed how those people looked earlier. Ezekiel stated this, Ezekiel in the Bible. Girded with girdles upon their loins, with pendant turbans upon their heads. You know what a pendant is? It's a gem or a stone that you put upon a wrap. A pendant turban. This shows you, brothers and sisters, the difference in the dress code as well. With pendant turbans upon their heads, all of them, captives to look upon, the likeness of the sons of Babylon, even of Chaldea, the land of what? Their nativity. This is Ezekiel, the 23rd chapter, speaking about the Israelites. What does it say in Ezekiel about the origin of the Israelites came from the land of Chaldea? J.A. Rogers, in his book, citing a guy who wrote a book called Anacalypsis, stated the Chaldeans were originally Negroes. The black man extended beyond continental Africa, brothers and sisters. And this is no hating on Africa whatsoever. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Next slide. Babylon and Chaldea. So we can see where the map is and where it's at for edification purposes. Chaldea, Babylon. This is what some historians are saying where the Negro comes from. We showed pictures of ancient Babylon earlier in the presentation. Not too hard to figure what we're talking about. It should be noted that secular and biblical history speaks of Babylon started by the Ethiopians. The book of Josephus speaks about it. You understand? There were two Ethiopias. The Indus Kush by modern day India, which is where we get the picture that we went earlier about the East Indians being black. And the Kush in continental Africa, all were of black people. So I hope, brothers and sisters, so far, that this is understood for edification purposes. All right? Next slide. Kingdoms and empires in Western Asia and Europe. Babylon, after defeating the Assyrians in the 7th century BCE. Babylon came to power in 606 to 538 BCE. Intermission. Toda, thank you for the time. All right. When I say intermission, it means I had to run over to the refrigerator and grab a water because I've been talking. So that's the situation with that. All right, so let's go on, brothers and sisters, and what we were dealing with and talking about. Persia, after defeating Babylon in 538 BCE, came to power to 331 BCE. Greece, after defeating Darius III in 331 BCE, came to power until 168 BCE in a Pydna battle and in a Corinth battle in 146 BCE. Rome came to power in 146 BCE, then in 285 AD, separated to east and west. The west fell in 476 BCE. Sorry, AD. The west fell in 476 AD. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Strabo and Durant. Strabo, 63 BCE to 24 AD, stated that the Hebrews in Cyrene, which is Libya, are in all cities, and it is hard to find from Egypt to in Libya where the Hebrews were, and they have influenced also others into their way of living. Will Durant stated that by 70 AD, there were thousands of Jews, blacks by the way, in Seleucia, Tigris, and numerous in Arabia, and crossed thence into Ethiopia. So Will Durant, he wrote a book entitled Caesar and Christ. And in that book, he spoke about how the Jews, by 70 AD, there were thousands of them in Seleucia and Tigris and numerous in Arabia and had crossed thence into Ethiopia. You know, Arabia was at one time including the places that we call Yemen and Oman of today. Did you know, brothers and sisters, that the tribe in Western Africa claims to be descended from the people in Yemen? Next slide. Afro-Asiatic. Ethiopia. Breakdown of the languages from such. Kushomotic, Cushitic, Kafa, Beja. Afro-Asiatic. Egyptian, Near East, New Africa, Berber, Chadic, Bolewa, Hausa, Near East, Semitic, Akkadian, Hebrew, Aramaic, Sequotri, Giz, Tigray, Harari, Amharic. Why does this list here on the left-hand side becomes important with the linguistics aspects? Akkadian is Akkad. Akkad, brothers and sisters, was the kingdom that was started by the Cushite named Nimrod. Hebrew, Aramaic. Remember we spoke about the Aramean people? Well, the people of Aram, brothers and sisters, are they who spoke the Aramaic language, and its cousin to Hebrew. And it descended from the Akkadian. So Hebrew is more so related, because remember Akkad was started by the Cushites, it's more so related to the Ethiopian language. You see? Boom, 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 boom. Hebrew descends from a people that is of color. You're not going to get a white image native to the place called Ethiopia that's called Etiops, which means burnt face, aka today called Ethiopia. All right? Let's look at this carefully, because you got Hebrew and Aramaic and Amharic. We already went over the Aramaic earlier. We showed that part. Then you got Amharic. We already know about Hebrew. We teach Hebrew on this channel, for instance. Let's see why does this become important. Next slide. Amharic. This is a person that is of the people of the Amharic people. How do they look? So let's go back to this chart here of the languages, brothers and sisters. Afro-Asiatic, the Hebrew, Aramaic, Amharic, as you can see there, right? If you're following the arrow. Ge'ez is a language that's still spoken in current day Ethiopia. Amharic is also spoken in current Ethiopia, and it is related linguistically to the Hebrews. So when we go back, brothers and sisters, to this part here, that says what? Will Durant stated that by 70 AD, there were thousands of Jews in Seleucia, Tigris, and numerous in Arabia, and crossed thence into Ethiopia. So from Arabia, all right, let's go back if we will, because we want to show what we're talking about for edification purposes. We see Arabia right here. I don't have the part where it showed the southern part, but we already can see and know and understand modern Ethiopia is even right over here. All right? So they crossed this into Ethiopia, if you can understand how a map would look. So again, where does this other people fit in at? They don't fit in. Okay? Oh, they don't fit in linguistically. They don't fit in the dream that Daniel had. They don't fit in being the clean people that Leviticus 13 talks about. Next slide. Beta Yisrael Falasha. And this is how they look. The Beta Yisrael Falasha that live in Gondar, Ethiopia. And they speak Amharic as well as Ge'ez. Brothers and sisters, they say that they came into Ethiopia due to the union of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Now, there are those who say that when the Queen of Sheba went to be around Solomon, that they were intimate with each other and had a son named Menelik. Some people say, well, the Bible doesn't say it, so therefore it can't be true. Brothers and sisters, and I don't mean to sound like a fool in saying this. Do you know that there are men today who don't talk about all their kids, all their children? I could show you that even in the Bible. You understand? David's son, brothers and sisters, one of his sons was named Absalom. Absalom had 4 sons. Yet in another part of the Bible, it says that Absalom had no sons to sit on the throne. That doesn't mean he didn't have any children. It just means he didn't have none for the throne. So we should know and understand that if the book of the Bible in 1 Kings chapter 10 said that Solomon gave the Queen of Sheba all her desire, it's not too hard to figure what we could be talking about. All right, let's go on. The Jews of Ethiopia and the Portuguese. In 1670, the Portuguese reported that in Ethiopia or Abyssinia, there is a group of people who keep the Old Testament ways. There apparently is or was an embarrassment to the European Jews. And this ties in later. The so-called Falashas, many of them, certainly in the 1600s, in the 17th century, did not know how to speak English. Next slide. Queen Kahina, a black woman who lived in the 7th century AD, who ruled over the Berbers, and is said to lead a war against the Arabs and take it. She is said to be of the, quote, Jews of North Africa. So you can look up Queen Kahina and see how she was saying, come on, O tribe of Judah, against the Arabs. You can look this up, brothers and sisters. All right? Next slide. Carthage matter. In the 9th century BCE, the people from Tyre went from there to settle in what is now Tunisia. In the 4th century BCE, it is said they, according to Hanno in the Periplus, went from Carthage to the Gambia. So let's understand, Carthage is in, or was in before it was destroyed, in Tunisia, right? As we can see here in the map there with the arrow. Then you have the Gambia, which is over here. So according to Hanno in the Periplus, it is stated that the people of Carthage went over here to the Gambia. You see where we're going with this? Blacks from Africa to America in the presence of the presidents in slavery. See how we're leading up from one step to the next? Let's go on for edification purposes. Gambia to Virginia by the West Indies. Edward Reynolds, correctly, in his book Stand the Storm, stated that the distance from Gambia to the West Indies is 3,200 miles. So from Gambia to the West Indies is 3,200 miles. William Cowley, in his book Black Cargoes, stated that Basel Negroes were brought from the West Indies to Virginia. What are Basel Negroes? Brothers and sisters, B-O-Z-A-L. Basel Negroes is the black people that was captured by the Spaniards in slavery. They was brought over to the West Indies, and from the West Indies to Virginia. So let's see how we have gone in this particular regard. All right? It says this, in the 9th century BCE, the people of Tyre, we spoke about Tyre earlier, went from there to settle in what is now Tunisia. Tunisia is right here. Carthage was there. And according to Hanno Periplus, they went to the Gambia. Then what happened to many who went to the Gambia? From the Gambia to the West Indies. As we can see here, from the Gambia to the West Indies. From the West Indies to good old Virginia. Virginia! We know what that's about, right? All right, let's go. I'm actually by Virginia today, but that's another subject. Ghana Empire. As we can see there. The Ghana Empire right here. Next slide. Mali Empire, as we can see right here. Next slide. Songhai Empire, as we can see right here. Now, in speaking about the Moors, brothers and sisters, the Moors of Spain, when they were, quote, kicked out of Spain, they in part in 1591 is responsible for the fall of the Songhai Empire. That's why I want to emphasize when we read earlier about the people in Libya called the Moors, that there were different peoples that were called Moors, just as much as there were different people called Asiatics, just as much as there are different people called Hebrews. All right, next slide. The slave trade aspect. Good old Black history. The Spanish. They could not get enough Spaniard slaves. Where were they to look? The answer was West Africa. Already, the Portuguese and Spanish had imported a few West African captives into their own countries. Brothers and sisters, how would you feel, or what would you say if I were to tell you that the first slave ship to go west left from Spain? What will you say, brothers and sisters, if it was known and shown that the people of Spain, namely Queen Isabella II, was the queen when they had the situation with the Amistad? And she argued the case about the Amistad to several presidents of the United States. What is the so-called conscious community talking about? Well, there was no Atlantic slave trade. What are you talking about? Who will make up a history such as that? You understand? There is, as many have pointed out, the Illuminati has infiltrated the conscious community. You can tell by certain statements like, there was no slave trade. We're not from Africa in no way, shape, form, or fashion. The hell with Africa. That's another statement. I don't know any English besides language. I don't know, pardon me, I don't know any, I'm thinking ahead of myself. I don't know any language besides English, but I'm going to sit there and claim this cold climate over here in the West. No. No, that's not going to jive when you get your studying done. Cantor stated the following. One of Henry's navigators, meaning Henry the Navigator, Anton Gonsalves reached the Guinea coast in 1441 and returned with slaves. In 1444 to 1455, the discoveries brought massive slaves to Portugal. Portugal, brothers and sisters, continued the slave trade, did you know, all the way until 1888, drops Mike. Picks Mike back up. Slave trade aspect. Blacks brought to Cuba in 1506. In 1516, Charles II issued a license in regards to have blacks as slaves, the Asiento, from 1543 until 1834, is what was used to have blacks brought to the West Indies as slaves. Now, the West Indies that we're talking about with the Asiento, all right, is this. The places today currently called Jamaica, Cuba, Haiti, and Dominican Republic. Why do you think I went over earlier about them being brought from the West Indies to Virginia? Next slide. The Portuguese in the 17th century had the Chicheco Slavery Company. The Dutch had the Dutch West India Company. In the 1630s, it was common for Dutch to take over Portuguese ships. What if I were to tell you that the black people brought to Virginia in 1619 were people that were already enslaved in a place called this place here, as I'm putting in a room, called Brazil? Next slide. The slave trade aspect, part 2. Ponce de Leon. Ponce de Leon is the person who is said, brothers and sisters, to have founded Florida and what they call the founder of Puerto Rico, who tried his best to obliterate the Taino people in modern Puerto Rico, is also the same who, quote, discovered Florida in 1513. In 1565, blacks were enslaved by the Spanish in what is now Florida until the era of 1810, then continued to 1865. St. Augustine in Florida, brothers and sisters, was a slave port for the Spanish. Florida was not part of the 13 colonies, and we're going to get into a presentation about the colonies another day this week. Vasquez alone, working for Charles V, had blacks brought as slaves to what is now South Carolina, to Virginia area in 1526. So the 1619 date, brothers and sisters, is a date due to the fact of the British, not when blacks was brought over, because the black people were brought over by the Spanish to what we call the area between South Carolina and Virginia in 1526. You understand? Next slide. John Hawkins, from 1562 to 1567, did 3 voyages in which blacks were sold as slaves in what we call Colombia and Venezuela. Next slide. All righty, here we go. Alive. We've gone over this before. The first slave owner in America was not only a black man, he went to court and demanded it. Like somebody said in the comment, they slick, right? In 1654, it was time for Anthony to release John Caesar, a black indentured servant. Instead, Anthony told Caesar he was extending his time. Caesar left and became employed by the free white man Robert Parker. Anthony Johnson sued Robert Parker in the Northampton court in 1564. In 1654, in 1655, the court ruled that Anthony Johnson could hold John Caesar indefinitely. The court gave judicial sanction for blacks to own a slave of their own race. Thus, Caesar became the first permanent slave, and Johnson, the first slave owner. How is that possible when we can just show right here, brothers and sisters, Vasquez alone, working for Charles V, had blacks brought as slaves to what is now South Carolina to Virginia area in 1526. How do you forget that aspect? Because it's the Spaniard and not the British? Because, brothers and sisters, this person that you see right here is not named Anthony Johnson. His name was Lewis Hayden. The people, brothers and sisters, in the 17th century did not even dress like this. They just put a picture up of some dude, put some words together, and people who don't study will sit there and be like, oh, wow, look, the first slave owner was a black man named Anthony. How did he get that name? Anthony Johnson. Who's his father if he is called John's son? Anthony Johnson, a black man? How did he get such a name? And brothers and sisters, remember, look up Lewis Hayden and to see what comes up. Because Lewis Hayden dates to the 19th century. Brothers and sisters, this is why studying is important for edification purposes. Hugh Thomas Manor. In 1625, the Dutchman John de Willem received a license to operate in the West Indies, Brazil, Virginia, and Guinea, meaning and operate in slave trade. In 1625, in Virginia, in 1626, the French traded in slaves and other stuff, such as ivory and gum. In 1619, we see about the Dutch man of war bringing 20 blacks as slaves to Jamestown, Virginia. This was not the first time blacks were enslaved in what is now the United States. Next slide. New York Manor. In what is now New York from 1626 to 1664, the date it became a colony, the Dutch had blacks as slaves. New York became a colony in 1664. That's why you must understand British America, colonial America, Dutch America, and Spaniard America. Because all of them had black people as slaves. From 1664 to 1776, the British began to enslave blacks in New York. From 1776 to 1827, Americans began to enslave blacks. New York became a state in 1788. Next slide. Now, the topic, the presence of the presidents in slavery. There were 12 presidents who had slaves. Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Jackson, Buren, Harrison, Tyler, Polk, Taylor, Johnson, and Grant. Now, let's sit there and say this together. Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Jackson, Buren, Harrison, Tyler, Polk, Taylor, Johnson, and Grant. You know what's interesting? Johnson was the 17th president of the United States. He was the president after Lincoln. So how is he, brothers and sisters, a slave owner if Lincoln was the one who freed the slaves? Huh? Johnson was the 17th president. How then, brothers and sisters, is he listed as a slave master if his running mate, which was Lincoln, was the one to say to get rid of slavery? This is how Lincoln fired two people for freeing the slaves. One of them was named Fremont. Fremont. And the other guy name was McClellan. Those two guys freed black people, and Lincoln fired them and put them back in slavery. So Lincoln, with his not so straight here, miss me pleased with that one, my beautiful brothers and sisters. Lincoln's wife had slaves. One of them was named Keckley. They show her inside of the movie Lincoln, made by the director, forget his name at the time. He also made the Tiny Toon Adventures. Steven Spielberg, that's his name. Thank you. All right. In Steven Spielberg's film, Lincoln's wife, slave, was known as Keckley. They try to sit there and say, oh, she was free. Free for what? She's the seamstress. She is a slave. Can she just go anywhere she wants? Nope. Therefore, she's a slave. Next slide. A style of literate slaves. Gabriel Prosser. It appears from the scanty information available that the Bible was used to impress the Negroes, that they, as the Israelites, could throw off the yoke of slavery and that God would come to their aid. Turner, speaking of Nat Turner, was a mystic who had found in reading the Bible what he regarded as a solution to the problem of Negro slavery. 55 whites were killed in the situation of Nat Turner's uprising. Both of these paragraphs came from a book called Negro in the United States by Edward Frazier. So we can cite our sources. What is this conscious community talking about? The Bible has never helped black people. The Negroes who knew how to read, brothers and sisters, used the Bible as a way to sit there and say, they, as the Israelites, that's the problem. The conscious community, controlled now by the Illuminati, has a problem with the house of Israel. That's the contentious spirit that they always want to debate the Israelites about. I remember, and I screenshot this, but I'll sit there and save it for another time. This dates back to a brother who wanted to debate me back in, really, you listen, this 2019, right? This screenshot, which I'm going to save only when I need to pull it out. This comes from a person who wanted to debate me, went on the House of Consciousness channel and spoke about me. Said, put down the Bible. Don't read the Bible. What black man goes and sells to another black man to not read? It was against the laws of the United States for the black man to read. So anybody, as I can sit there and show the so-called conscious community, reading Message with Mike Palmer, put down the Bible, don't read that. Who are you batting for? On this channel, I did a video called Who is the Black Woman Batting For? When she goes and starts talking about swirling for the white man. You got black men swirling for the white man too. Going to sit there and tell another black man to not read. Are you serious? Don't read that? I'm an Israelite. I'm not going to tell a brother to not read the Quran. And I don't even subscribe to the Quran. I'm an Israelite. I'm not going to tell a brother to not read the 120 of the 5%ers. And I don't sit there and subscribe to the teachings of who they refer to as Father Allah. I'm an Israelite. I'm not going to tell nobody to not read the Code of Hammurabi. And I don't subscribe to the doctrine and teaching of the Babylonians. If you are confident in your own stance, you're not going to tell somebody what not to do. because you're going to be able to stand in your own stance. It says the righteous stand bold as a lion. We read about the Lion of Judah. We read about Dan as a lion in the book of Deuteronomy. So if you are strong in your stance, you will never be known for sitting there telling any brother or sister to not sit there and read any book. Next slide. Oluda Equiano. He stressed the similarities between the Old Testament Jews and those of his own people, the Igbo. Like the Israelites in their primitive state, our government, our chiefs, our judges, our wise men, elders, we had our circumcision, sacrifices, washings, and purifications, and on the same occasions as they did. Now, Oluda Equiano was a person that was taken from Nigeria as a slave. And there's a biography of him. And this of it is called The Life of Oluda Equiano, which you can get online, page 20 in that book. He stated, like the Israelites in their primitive state, the Israelites in their primitive state. Why do I want to emphasize on that? Because the community, another one raising up against the house of Israel, which I typed in the room, henotheistic. Well, the ancient Israelites had henotheism. No, the ancient Israelites was given the Torah in their primitive state. And they were told to not sit there and deal with anybody else's gods or the gods of the nations. And if those other gods did not help the house of Israel, if you know yourself as the house of Israel, lo tihiyu zonim, don't be whores. Thou shalt not be whores. Don't sit there about from doctrine to doctrine and God to God. You understand? This is something we want to go over for edification purposes. Henotheism is a teaching and a concept that only works when you already have a spirit of a whore. Oh, what did that God of Moab say? Or what did that God of Egypt say? What did that God of Ekron say? What did that God of what? If it is not the one who created the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that in them is, it is not the Elohim of our people. If it is not the one who can sit there and lay a prophecy down as Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, and then tell you the antidote to your problem. That's how you know about the Most High. It says he declares the end of a matter before the beginning. The gods of the other nations cannot do that. They cannot tell you what will happen and then tell you the problem and then tell you how to fix the problem. The gods of the other nations cannot do that. That's how you know the God of the Old Testament is the true and the living God. Because Deuteronomy 28 talks about what we always talk about, and Deuteronomy 30 talks about what we need to do. Next slide. Europeans in the wrong places. You see there with the yarmulke at what they call the Wailing Wall. Trump went to the Wailing Wall, but then he sits there and denounces CNN. CNN is ran by the people who wear the yarmulkes, buddy. You can't have it both ways. They are in the land of Israel. Whether people say that Wailing Wall is in truly the land of Ephraim or truly the land of Jerusalem, that's another subject. Because we know Jerusalem is in the east, but many brothers and sisters are saying the current state that they say on the news as Jerusalem is not the real Jerusalem. So what did I do, being a person who has not traveled there yet? I asked the Israelites that are in Dimona, that are living in the land of Israel. And I asked them when they was in New York, I said, Achai, my brothers, yesh li she'ela lish'ol echem. I have a question to ask you all. And they looked at me, knowing Hebrew, and they said, Sha'al et she'elaka. I was like, okay, yeah, here we go. I'm feeling good at this point. Ask your question. Hamakom asher nikla le'Yushalayim. Hanakom hahu hanakom. And they knew exactly what I was talking about. What I said was the place that is currently known and called Jerusalem, is that the correct place? And they looked at me and they said, no. The Jerusalem that they show you on the news is not the real Jerusalem. The Jerusalem they show you on the news is north of the real Jerusalem. And they told me that. So I haven't been there. I'll take their word for that until I find out different. I can believe that. But regardless of that, whether it's in Jerusalem, the real one, or the land of Ephraim of ancient days, because Ephraim was north of Benjamin, and true Jerusalem is in the land of Benjamin, they are still in the wrong place. That's not Ephraim. That's not the children of Joseph. That's not the children of Benjamin or Judah or Levi. Then we see the Europeans also here in Johannesburg in South Africa. These are not the Zulu. These are not the Hamites. Just as much as these people with the yarmulkes are not the descendants of the people that we showed taken from Lachish with the cornrows. Brothers and sisters, giving honor and praise unto Yah, the creator and the maker of heaven and earth. Brothers and sisters, I thank everybody for the time and for the attention that was given in this particular aspect. The term Middle East is made up in 1902. There is no such thing as a Middle Eastern race, since there is no set land called Middle East or language called Middle East. Bibliography: Black Summa by Herman Herstein. Before the Mayflower, Laurent Bennett Jr. History of Ancient Israel, Michael Grant. Biblical Archaeology in Focus, Louis Chauville. The Babylonians, Gwendolyn Leak. Bible as History in Pictures, Warner Keller. African Presence in Early Europe, Ivan Sertima. Ancient Near East in Text and Pictures, James Pritchard. This is what you do when you respect your audience, brothers and sisters. Give them a bibliography. Atlas of Ancient Egypt, Baines and Malek. The Encyclopedia of Medieval Ages. Norman Cantor. A History of West Africa, Basil Davidson. The Slave Trade by Hugh Thomas. The Negro in the United States, E. Franklin Frazier. I just want this to be noted so you can see where the information I got came from. See, I just didn't come off the top of my head. I'm citing a bibliography out of respect for the people. The brothers and sisters who show love and respect. Love you all. Much love and respect. Share the video. Subscribe to the channel. Constructive criticism, I'm open for it. My number, 908-587-4841. Call or text. Tonight, later on, I got to sit here and deal with my flight going back into New York. So if you do call or text and I don't respond, that's why. All right? So everybody, have a good night. Shalom. I have to leave in 20 minutes in order to get my flight on time. Y'all have a good night.